What if we tell you that Africa in the next few years will look like China? Not Europe, but China. China rose from famine to factories, from colonized to unstoppable, without asking the West for permission. Now Africa is rising, but something feels too familiar. Is Africa walking China's path? If yes, what can Africa learn from China? Let's find out. Everyone admires China's skyline today, but few remember the mud roads, factory fumes, and backbreaking decisions that laid the foundation beneath it. Before China became a superpower, it became a construction site, not metaphorically, literally. The world saw poverty, but China saw concrete, cables, and control. In the 1980s, when global economists laughed at China's backwardness, the country didn't fight for respect. It fought for infrastructure. It wasn't chasing votes or headlines. It was laying the roads to the future. Massive rail lines cut through deserts. Entire cities rose from swamps. Power grids reached villages before television did. And most of this was done without waiting for World Bank permission slips. This is where the first, and perhaps most brutal lesson lies for Africa. Before you demand wealth, you must design the ground it will stand on. Let's not sugarcoat it. Much of Africa today is skipping steps. There are tech summits in capitals where 70% of the surrounding towns don't have paved roads. Ministers speak of digital Africa, while villages wait for their first mobile signal. It's not hypocrisy, it's hope. But hope without hardware is a fantasy. China didn't talk about smart cities until it built dumb cities that work. Sewage systems, ports, industrial clusters, and power plants. Even ghost towns like Ordos were calculated gambles, not failures. They were blueprints in motion. Africa, on the other hand, often builds for the camera. Airports with no planes, highways with no trucks, cities with no jobs. Why? Because Western donors fund symbols, not systems. China refused that trap. It self-funded much of its early infrastructure, often through uncomfortable sacrifices. Workers endured 12-hour shifts. Rural communities were relocated. The state took control of planning. Was it perfect? Was it effective? Yes. It created momentum. It said, "We'll build first. Wealth will follow." And it did. Now look at Ethiopia. The Addis-Djibouti Railway, built with Chinese help, was meant to be the start of an industrial belt. But it hit bottlenecks. Why? Because railways alone don't create industry. You need manufacturing zones, power supply, training centers, and a government strategy, all working in sync. Otherwise, the tracks lead nowhere. And that's another brutal truth Africa must face. A road is not just asphalt, it's intention. China's roads always led somewhere, to ports, to factories, to hubs that generated value. Many African roads today lead to tourist spots, not trade hubs. They serve cars, not commerce. And worse, they often serve elites, not the nation. If Africa wants to rise like China, it must abandon the mindset that infrastructure is for prestige. It is for production. Not ribbon cuttings, revenue. A school without teachers is an abandoned road. A hospital without power is a lie. A dam that generates no electricity is a statue. And too many such statues dot Africa's landscape. China also made a decision early on that many African countries still hesitate to embrace urbanization as a national strategy. Instead of fearing slums, it absorbed rural populations into planned cities, connected by rail, fed by logistics, and employed by factories. Africa today still holds on to rural romanticism, but the future is urban, digital, and industrial. Villages are important, yes, but without urban engines, the country stalls. This doesn't mean Africa must copy China's every brick, but it must study the logic, the sequencing, the timing. China didn't wait for democracy, nor did it wait for investors. It built, it bet on itself, and by doing so, it created an irreversible path. That's the first road Africa must walk, the road of no return. Build so much, connect so wide, plan so far, that the system can't collapse even if a politician changes. So, what does this mean practically? Power grids must come before data plans. Transport corridors must connect trade routes, not just cities. Industrial zones must sit where raw materials already exist. Public transport must serve workers, not just office towers. Housing must rise not where land is cheap, but where jobs are coming. China mastered this balance because it saw infrastructure as the spine of power. Africa still treats it as a decoration. The final lesson here? Build invisibly. The greatest Chinese infrastructure achievements weren't flashy. They were silent enablers. Africa must do the same. Roads, power, clean water, logistics, these are not glamorous, but without them, glamour dies. And now we ask, if Africa builds the road, who's steering the vehicle? Let's answer that next. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. So the foundation is laid, the roads are coming, the power stations hum. But here's the question that will define Africa's rise or its derailment. Who decides where the vehicle goes? In China's case, there was never confusion. From the start, it was clear that Beijing was driving, not Washington, not the IMF, not some international task force with fancy acronyms. It was a one-party system with ruthless internal debates, yes, but it was also a sovereign driver behind the wheel, charting its course with a mix of long-term vision and total control. Africa, however, still struggles with the steering wheel. Roads may be paved by locals, but the map is too often drawn by outsiders. Let's be blunt. Too many African strategies are not African. They are foreign frameworks dressed in local colors. National development plans are often written with the subtle watermark of the IMF, USAID, or EU consultants. They sound African, but the logic isn't. The goals, GDP growth, inflation targets, and fiscal discipline, are not wrong. But they are not deeply African either. They're built on what outsiders believe Africa should be, not what Africa must become. This is where China broke all the rules. In the 1980s and 90s, Western institutions warned it against central planning, state-owned enterprises, and currency controls. But China ignored them. It kept control of its markets, protected its industries, and opened up only when it was ready. It created SOEs, state-owned enterprises that served national priorities, not foreign investors. Africa, on the other hand, is still told that state control is inefficient, even as Western countries subsidize their own farmers and tech sectors with billions. Why is Africa still told to let go of the wheel? Because whoever controls the steering wheel controls the destination. If development projects are dictated by loan conditions, aid incentives, or trade dependencies, then the road will never lead to sovereignty. It will lead back to the donor. Take agriculture. China fed over 1 billion people, not by importing American wheat, but by investing in local seed technology, irrigation, and land reforms. Africa has the land, the water, and the manpower, yet imports $43 billion in food every year. Why? Because policies are often written to favor food imports, not food independence. Who gains? Western exporters. Who loses? African farmers. Even more worrying is the digital road. While Africa lays down internet cables and 5G towers, the data flows into servers in Silicon Valley or Brussels. African startups use Western platforms. African children learn through apps designed by people who've never set foot on the continent. This is digital colonialism. You build the road, but someone else programs the GPS. China didn't fall for that trap. It built its search engines, social media, payment platforms, surveillance systems, and firewalls. Not because it feared freedom, but because it feared foreign domination of its data and narratives. Africa must learn from this, not just technically, but ideologically. The road to power isn't just physical or digital, it's strategic control. Who sets your curriculum? Who trains your soldiers? Who finances your elections? These are not side questions. These are the steering wheels. Now take the case of Captain Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso. He rejected free mosques from Saudi Arabia, not because religion is wrong, but because foreign-funded religious architecture was a vehicle. It would have carried foreign influence into the heart of his nation. So instead, he built a Pan-African school, a center of learning, not preaching. That wasn't just an infrastructure decision, it was a declaration of intellectual independence. That's what African leadership must internalize. Every road built must also ask where it leads and who benefits from the journey. Here's the brutal truth. Many African leaders have built shiny roads that go nowhere because they never ask the one question that matters. Is this project serving the people or serving the donors? To shift this, Africa must reclaim policy sovereignty. That means writing its development doctrines, designing Afrocentric economics rooted in local realities, not Harvard textbooks, investing in local think tanks, not relying on Western consultancies, building strategic industries even if they're not competitive by global standards. When China started its car industry, it was mocked. Who would buy Chinese cars? Fast forward to today, Chinese EVs are outselling German models in Europe. Because they built with purpose, not applause. Africa must now build the same way. This is not a call for isolation. It's a call for sovereign integration, working with others but always on your terms. If China took loans, it was to build assets. If it opened markets, it demanded reciprocity. It never gave up its steering rights. So the question now is not whether Africa can drive, it's whether it dares to take back the wheel. Because the road is paved, the engine is running. But if you don't choose the destination, someone else already has. Laying roads and taking control of the steering wheel. That's progress. But let's be honest, driving fast without a map is how you get lost faster. That's the next lesson from China's rise that Africa cannot afford to miss. It's not just about motion, it's about direction. Long, deliberate, strategic direction. China did not stumble into greatness. It calculated every turn. While the West thought in quarters, China planned in generations. In the 1970s, China was reeling from the Cultural Revolution. Its economy was shattered. Yet in 1978, when Deng Xiaoping opened up the country, he didn't just aim for recovery. He aimed for transformation by 2049, the 100th anniversary of the People's Republic. That's how China thinks. Not in 4-year terms, not in donor cycles, but in centuries. Africa, by contrast, often lives in the urgency of now. 5-year election plans, annual aid targets, project lifespans determined by foreign NGOs. It's understandable. A continent plundered for 500 years is desperate for change, but desperation is not a strategy. Speed isn't strength if you don't know your destination. So what did China do that Africa still hasn't fully embraced? First, it aligned its entire state machinery around a national vision. Ministries didn't operate in silos. They followed centralized 5-year plans. Universities produced engineers and technicians based on projected industrial needs. Cities were expanded based on future economic zones, not existing populations. Even education, entertainment, and urban planning were coordinated for long-term cultural cohesion. Africa, on the other hand, often lacks policy continuity. A president's vision rarely survives the next election. Ministries change course like weather vanes. And worst of all, national plans often respond to external threats, not internal purpose. That's why Africa needs what China built, a national imagination. China didn't just build roads, it painted a picture of where those roads were going. Shenzhen was once a fishing town. Beijing said, "We'll make it the Silicon Valley of hardware," and did it. Cities like Chongqing, Chengdu, and Hangzhou were designed with a future economy in mind. Not traffic, not tourism, strategy. Africa must now build its own Shenzhen equivalents, not as photo ops, but as planned engines of growth. Take Nigeria. It has the population to rival China in the next decades. But what's the vision for 2070? Will it be the center of African AI? Will it dominate electric vehicle manufacturing? Or will it still be exporting crude oil and importing refined fuel? Take South Africa. It has the most developed economy on the continent. But what's its long-term positioning? A finance hub? A biotech leader? A cultural superpower? Too often, African countries chase foreign investment before defining why they want it. What sectors matter? What industries will dominate in 50 years? If Africa doesn't answer these questions now, someone else will, and not in Africa's favor. Another critical part of China's success was human capital alignment. It didn't just educate people, it trained them for a purpose. China didn't produce unemployed sociology graduates while importing engineers. It created a talent pipeline, aligned with its 100-year vision. Africa's education systems today are rich in passion, but poor in planning. Youth are being prepared for jobs that don't exist, or worse, jobs that serve other countries. Why is Africa exporting nurses to Europe while its hospitals are understaffed? Why is it sending engineers abroad while its roads crumble? Because there's no long-range national labor strategy. There's no vision binding education, technology, agriculture, and trade into one ecosystem of future relevance. Even in innovation, China didn't rush into trends. It observed, studied, and then dominated. While the West laughed at its early tech efforts, China quietly built Huawei, Alibaba, and ByteDance, companies that today challenge American hegemony. These weren't overnight miracles. They were born from a state-led vision. Africa can do this too, but not if it keeps reacting to the crisis instead of committing to deep generational goals. That's the core truth. You can build roads, you can take the wheel, but if you have no map, you're just performing motion, not progress. And yes, we've seen glimpses of long-term thinking. Rwanda's Vision 2050, Kenya's digital ambitions, Egypt's new administrative capital. But isolated cases do not make a continent-wide transformation. What's needed now is a pan-African 100-year doctrine, backed by continental willpower, not donor conferences. Here's a radical idea. Every African country should have a national planning office mandated to plan the next 50 years, not 5. It should work alongside ministries, revise with new technology, and align with continental interests, and it should be protected from politics. That's how China won. It removed ego from planning and put the country first. The West may call that authoritarianism, but Africans must decide, do we want applause from Europe or results for ourselves? So here we are. The roads are built, the vehicle is reclaimed, and now we see the vast open horizon ahead. Now let's imagine that Africa doesn't just rise, it rewrites global history. That it doesn't become another consumer market for Europe or a cheap resource base for Asia, but a self-made force, sovereign, industrialized, and respected. It's not fiction. China already did it. And if Africa truly follows that path with its touch, here's what the future could look like. First, walk into a village in rural Mozambique in 2045. The roads are paved. Solar panels line every roof. There's a data center nearby, not owned by Google, but by a local cooperative. The youth are online, learning machine repair and code writing, not English literature, which prepares them for anything. And nearby, a fully functional agro-industrial park processes cassava, cocoa, and millet, not for export, but for a continent-wide food supply chain that feeds Africa by Africa. That's what it looks like when infrastructure leads to systems, and systems lead to independence. Travel north to Burkina Faso. The gold refinery is operating at full capacity, but gold isn't being flown out in secrecy to Switzerland. It's staying home. A new African reserve currency, backed partially by gold and natural gas, is being stabilized by the AES economic bloc. Inflation is no longer dictated by the IMF. It's managed locally. Financial tools are pan-African, built for African volatility, African strength, and African culture. This is what happens when you own the financial road. Fly east to Nairobi. It's no longer just a regional capital. It's an AI hub. Not because it begged for tech, but because it planned for it. Tech schools produced 100,000 software engineers in a decade. The Kenyan government created safe regulations for robotics and smart manufacturing. Now, Nairobi competes directly with Bangalore. But this time, the servers are hosted in Kisumu, and the data belongs to Kenyans. This is what it looks like when you don't sell the future for today's salary. Zoom out. By 2060, Africa will no longer be a continent with potential. It's a continental power. It has 1.7 billion people, a majority young, skilled, connected. It's no longer exporting raw materials and importing shampoo. It's designing its brands, its machines, and its standards. Made in Ghana, designed in Uganda, engineered in Ethiopia. That's the new normal. In this new Africa, cities are not just taller, they're smarter. Public transport runs on clean hydrogen. Waste is recycled locally. Slums are replaced with high-density, green vertical neighborhoods. Farming is powered by AI. Fishermen use satellite data to track fish migration. Local currencies are stable, trade is mostly intra-African, and visa-free travel is universal. But success isn't just GDP or high rises, it's dignity. It's the fact that a child born in Mali no longer feels the need to escape to France. That a girl in Kinshasa dreams of becoming a drone engineer, not a domestic worker in Dubai. African presidents are invited to summits not to be scolded, but to offer solutions. It's that Africa is no longer trying to catch up because it's leading. But will Africa be brave enough to drive there no matter who tries to block the road? Let us know in the comment section. Can anyone stop Africa? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.